At just 10 years old, he walked onto a foreign stage with empty pockets, trembling hands, and a voice nobody expected. What happened next didn't just shock the judges of Ireland's Got Talent, it broke Simon Cowell into tears and changed a child's destiny forever. Before this story unfolds, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss a moment where dreams rise from nothing and voices rewrite fate. His name was Mateo Reyes, a small boy from a forgotten fishing village on the southern edge of the Philippines, a place where mornings smelled of salt and rusted nets and nights echoed with hunger more often than laughter. Mateo had never seen a real opera house. He had never touched a piano polished by wealth or stood beneath chandeliers glowing like stars. His world was narrow, shaped by cracked wooden floors, leaking roofs, and a mother who counted coins before every meal. Mateo's father had been a fisherman, strong and quiet, the kind of man whose love lived in actions rather than words. When Mateo was 6, the sea took him during a storm that arrived without mercy. The boat never returned. The body was never found. From that day on, silence filled the house in ways Mateo did not yet understand. His mother, Elena, stopped singing while she cooked. His older sister, Rosa, left school to work at a roadside stall. Mateo learned early that childhood ends faster when grief moves in. Music came into Mateo's life not through lessons or training, but through an old battery-powered radio his father once brought home from a junk market. It barely worked. Some stations hissed more than they played, but late at night, when the air was still, Mateo found voices that sounded larger than life. He did not know the words opera, tenor, or classical music. He only knew that when those voices soared, something inside his chest lifted too. Mateo began to sing quietly at first, copying sounds he didn't understand. He sang while fetching water, while helping mend nets, while lying beside his mother after long days when the power was out. Elena noticed something strange. Her son's voice did not sound like a child's imitation. It carried weight. It carried sadness. Sometimes it carried hope. She told him to sing louder, but he was afraid. In their village, singing was for festivals, not survival. One afternoon, a traveling volunteer teacher named Siobhan arrived. She was Irish, visiting remote areas to help children with basic education. When she heard Mateo singing alone near the shore, she froze. She had grown up attending opera in Dublin. She recognized the impossible immediately. This boy had a natural operatic tone, untrained but raw and haunting. When she asked him where he learned to sing, Mateo simply said, "The radio taught me." Siobhan spoke to Elena that night. She explained that Mateo's voice was rare, something people spend lifetimes searching for. Elena listened politely but guardedly. Dreams had never fed her children. Still, Siobhan refused to leave it there. She contacted contacts back home, sent recordings made on her phone, and waited. Weeks passed. Then an email arrived that made her hands shake. An invitation. An audition. Not in Manila. In Ireland. The idea sounded impossible. Elena laughed at first, then cried. They had no passports. No money. No connections. Mateo thought Ireland was a storybook place where music lived in castles. When Siobhan offered to help with fundraising, paperwork, and sponsorship, Elena faced the hardest decision of her life. Letting her 10-year-old son fly across the world without her. The night before Mateo left, Elena slept on the floor beside him. She whispered prayers into his hair, afraid that if she spoke too loudly, the dream might disappear. Mateo promised he would sing for his father. He promised he would come back. Ireland was colder than Mateo imagined. The buildings felt older than time. The language sounded sharp and fast. Backstage at Ireland's Got Talent, Mateo stood alone in a borrowed coat, clutching a small rosary his mother pressed into his hand before he boarded the plane. He did not understand who Simon Cowell was. He did not know that millions would watch. He only knew he had to sing. When his name was called, the audience murmured. A poor Filipino child on an Irish stage did not match expectations. Some smiled kindly. Others looked uncertain. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Mateo introduced himself in a soft voice. When asked what he would sing, he said an opera piece he heard on the radio, one his father loved. The music began. The first note silenced the room. It was not perfect. It was not polished. But it was pure. Mateo's voice carried the weight of loss, the ache of distance, and the innocence of a child who had never known comfort. His small body seemed too fragile to produce such sound. Judges leaned forward. Audience members wiped their eyes without realizing it. And Simon Cowell, known for his skepticism, stopped blinking. Halfway through the performance, Mateo faltered. His voice cracked for just a second. He saw his mother's face in his mind and nearly froze. Then he remembered his promise. He pushed forward. The final note rang out like a farewell and a beginning at once. The room exploded into applause. Simon Cowell stood. His eyes were wet. When he spoke, his voice broke. He said he had heard thousands of singers, trained singers, privileged singers, but he had never heard pain and hope live in a voice like that. He said Mateo did not just sing opera. He told a story the world needed to hear. Then something unexpected happened. Simon reached for the golden buzzer. The confetti fell, but Mateo didn't understand what it meant. He thought maybe he had done something wrong. When Siobhan ran onto the stage crying, explaining that he had just secured a place in the finals, Mateo collapsed into her arms. Back in the Philippines, Elena watched from a neighbor's television, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. The weeks that followed were overwhelming. Media interviews, vocal coaches, critics arguing whether a child should carry such heavy music. Some questioned his background, his age, his authenticity. Mateo felt small again. Doubt crept in. He missed home. He missed rice cooked by his mother. He missed the sea. On the night of the finals, Mateo almost didn't go on stage. Fear gripped him harder than poverty ever had. But then a letter arrived backstage. It was from his sister Rosa. She wrote that their village gathered every night to watch him, that children who never dreamed before were now singing into broken radios, believing they mattered. Mateo walked out and sang not to win, but to give back. He did not win the competition. But he won something larger. A scholarship, global attention, a future no storm could steal. Today, Mateo studies music formally. His family lives in a safer home. His voice continues to grow, but it still carries the sound of a boy who sang to survive. Simon Cowell later said that performance reminded him why talent shows exist, not for fame, but for moments when the world stops and listens. And somewhere in a small Philippine village, a radio still plays late at night, carrying hope across the sea.